This morning on Inside Texas Politics.
Our affordability issues in Austin, it's an emergency. And when I don't even use the word crisis, it's an emergency.
Kirk Watson is going back to City Hall. He won a narrow race to become Austin's mayor again, and he did so in a way that no one can remember happening before. Families of Uvalde victims take their pleas once again to Congress.
It's my hope that from our testimony, we were able to change some hearts and minds to at least add an amendment to the Safer Communities Act.
State Senator Roland Gutierrez made the trip there with them. And lawmakers working up until the last minute this week to fund the federal government. Congressman Colin Allred with us from D.C. on how that bipartisan bill is likely going to make it harder for another January 6th to happen.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers across the state. We're heading into the holidays here, but there is still a lot happening politically. For starters, the Republican Party of Texas says it wants new leadership in the National Republican Party. The Texas GOP saying it has lost faith in Ronna McDaniel there. She is the RNC chair. Texas Republicans say the RNC needs to improve messaging and fundraising, among other things. The Republican National Committee will elect a new chair next month. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in the news again, this time for wanting to know how many Texans have changed their gender on state driver's licenses. The Washington Post first reported this. Paxton's office did not say why it wanted this information, but state Republican leaders have been critical lately of transgender Texans. And another name to watch in the race for 2024, it's Tim Scott right here. Senator John Cornyn, our senior senator, says that Scott should run for president. Right now, he represents South Carolina. He is the only black Republican in the Senate, and Senator Scott has the backing of a number of other Republican colleagues right now if he decides to run for president. Let's begin this morning, though, in the capital city of Texas. Austin elected a new mayor last week. It is a familiar face, Kirk Watson, who actually served as mayor more than 20 years ago, and then more recently as a state senator. Watson won a very close race against Celia Israel, and he also won in a way that no one can remember happening before. We spoke to the mayor-elect just hours after his win from his home in Austin. Mr. Mayor-elect, congratulations to you. This was a very close race, 113,000 total votes cast. You won by 886. How will that narrow victory shape your administration?
I think it emphasizes the passion of the voters in Austin, Texas, and how close they were paying attention to certain things. And as I said last night, now yesterday was an election and that was the end of that. Today is a new beginning. And the key thing is we're going to do better when we're together. And so what I am saying is that I want us to recognize that we all have something really in common, and that is our love of Austin.
Let's talk more about the election results because they're kind of interesting here. You won where the city of Austin stretches into Williamson County. You also won where it stretches into Hayes County as well, but you lost Travis County by 17 votes. Has that ever happened before? Has Austin ever elected a mayor that did not win Travis County?
I don't know. I haven't gone back and looked at that. I do know that this is I'm told that this is the first time that someone that came in second in the general election, for a mayor's race, that person ended up winning the election in the runoff. That's the first time that's ever happened. But I don't know about the other aspects of that, Travis versus Williamson and Hayes.
You're taking over at City Hall, as we talked to you recently on Inside Texas Politics, with a number of existential issues facing the city, affordability, mass transit, policing as well. When you take over at the first of the year, what is at the top of your to-do list on day one?
Well, I would say there's two things among, all the other things about getting ready and starting the first day of office and being sworn in and that kind of thing. But there are two things. One is I really do believe that cost of living and affordability in this community is an emergency situation. So I want to immediately begin on various programs that will be included in that, including where we want to go on some of these bond elections we've recently had, so that we're expediting what we need to do with regard to housing, including what we do in our permitting department to make that work more efficiently. But I also, as part of affordability, I've said from the very beginning of this campaign that the second largest expense in many households behind housing costs is childcare. And I think that Austin needs to address childcare and early childhood development in a different way. And my intention on the very first day is to appoint a blue ribbon task force to report back in no more than 90 days on what we need to do to move forward so that we make Austin the best city in America to raise a child.
This is an interesting little twist here to everything, because this term that you just got elected to is for 2 years and not for 4 years, because
Right.
voters there in Austin wanted to flip things to make sure the mayoral race aligns with the presidential elections. Does a shorter term for you in this office, does that increase the pressure on you to get things done?
Well, it certainly aligns with my mentality, which is that we need to move with immediacy. We need to move with a sense of urgency. In my view, City Hall needs to be shaken up, and that to make sure we're focusing on basics in the way we should, and that requires a level of immediacy to it. So
you say shaken up. What do you mean by that?
well, I think we've too often been offered an all or nothing choice. Things like, for example, we were just talking about police. We can have a very just system of policing, and it's not a binary choice with having a fully staffed police department. So things like that. On the homelessness issues, I think it's always been left as an all or nothing. The land development code, all or nothing. We've had too much of a winner take all. I got to win. If I win, you got to lose. And so that we have to change the way we do that. We have to shake that up. And I believe that I have the background and have proven the ability to do that. But that does put a sense of immediacy and urgency to it. I've said, over and over again, our affordability issues in Austin, it's an emergency. And when I don't even use the word crisis, it's an emergency. And when you have an emergency, you need to react like it's an emergency.
You talked about wanting to shake things up at City Hall. Do you think you'll have the votes on City Council to get your priorities accomplished?
Yes, and I'm very eager to work with the members of the Austin City Council. I've had contact with all of the members that are incumbent, and I've had contact with the 3 new members that were elected last night in runoffs. I have a lot of respect for those members of the council, and my way of leading many times, or my way of doing things, whether it's leading or just being part of a team, is to be part of a team.
Mr. Mayor-elect, congratulations to you. Happy New Year as well.
You too. Thank you very much.
More about Austin there in just a moment, but Texas is behind when it comes to broadband. The federal government will soon split $42 billion to help states upgrade, and Texas wants some of that money, rightly so, but it says the national map that is being used to dole out all these billions of dollars, that map is not accurate, the state says. So Texas is asking for a little more time to get things figured out. Ian Mitra is the senior managing editor at the Texas Tribune. Ian, good to see you again. Let's talk about this for a moment. The Trib covered this story the other day. How much could Texas get from this? And more importantly, is it going to get the time to make its case?
Yeah, as you mentioned, billions of dollars are on the line in support for broadband technology and infrastructure across the state. And, the comptroller of the state, Glenn Hager, has communicated to the federal government that the map that's being kind of used to kind of draw out and dole out funds is flawed. There's areas that are being shown to have better access than it does. And so, that's really key and important when it comes to doling out this money. And so a lot of local communities are also very concerned too. So while the comptroller sent out a letter hoping for a delay before these funds are finalized, there's also local communities that are going to be doing some bulk kind of requests for this as well. So, with that kind of response to these maps, I think there is going to be some more consideration of how they're drawn right now before they start, finalizing funds.
Yeah, and lots of money is on the line. I am back to you in just a moment. Thank you very much.
Right.
Coming up next here in the program, a bipartisan bill in Congress likely to include provisions that would prevent another January 6th. Congressman Colin Allred with us from D.C. in just a moment. And mothers and fathers of the school children massacred in Uvalde also there in Washington. State Senator Roland Gutierrez made the trip with them and tells us what they now want from Congress. Inside Texas Politics, back in a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. On Friday of this week, Congress will vote on funding the federal government through the new year. But that bipartisan bill is also going to make it harder for another January 6th to happen. We spoke to Congressman Colin Allred about that and the millions of dollars he is bringing back to North Texas. Congressman Allred, good to see you again. Let's start with the gifts you are bringing back to North Texas right now. It's community project funding, and you got nearly $20 million for specific projects in North Texas, in your district and other places around. What specifically is this going to pay for?
Well, it's going to programs from DART to Children's Hospital to the city of Dallas. And really, we have a unique setup where I form a board, really, that reviews all the submissions that we receive. They rank them. They say which ones will have the best impact on the community. And then we go with their submissions. And so to me, this is the most transparent way that I can do this, where whatever funding we're bringing back and whatever funding I'm directing to our community is being led by community leaders. And there's no element of it just being what I prefer, but that it's what our community leaders who are across various sectors of our economy know will help us.
Congress is going to be working up until Friday, December 23rd, trying to get a spending bill passed. It's a bipartisan deal, which is encouraging here so far. In your opinion, what does it need to include, and will it include what you think it should?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that so far it looks like it's going to include the Electoral Count Reform Act, which is a bipartisan effort to reform the Electoral Count Act, which is what January 6th was all about, to clarify some of the provisions in there. But I've been meeting with our diplomatic folks, with our military folks. They need to be able to plan long term around the world and make important investments for us to compete with China, deal with the war in Ukraine, have all kinds of international priorities that we really need to be able to set that are based on predictable and understandable funding levels. And it's not just wondering if the money's going to be there. And so I think it's the responsible thing for us to do. Obviously, also keeping the government open is important. I think the American people would not accept a shutdown of the United States government at this point. And so I'm glad that it looks like there's a bipartisan agreement around it. We don't have much time, and the Senate is pretty slow, but I think we'll get it done.
Will the Electoral Count Act, will that make it in the final version, you think?
As of this moment, it looks like it's going to be in.
Look to the future here, Tad. In just a couple of weeks, Democrats will become the minority in the U.S. House of Representatives, and Republicans will have majority control. What do you expect that your party might be able to get accomplished over the next 2 years that Republicans are in charge?
Well, the control of the House is going to change, but my approach is going to remain the same. We're just going to be trying to find those areas where we can find common ground and agreement. And I actually think that my work over the last 4 years is going to set me in good stead to continue to work, particularly with some of our folks here in the Texas delegation who I've developed good relationships with. And we have some important legislation that we have to pass, and we have some things that we have to come together and find compromises around. And so, it's going to be an era of divided government, but it's going to be a majority in the Republican side here in the House, in which they're going to need oftentimes Democratic votes to pass legislation. I'll probably be one of those Democrats that you'll see trying to find and showing up on those votes where they need our votes to pass it. But I hope that we can do that, because I also know that this is not the John Boehner or the Paul Ryan Republican Party. I think we've seen more extreme voices come forward, especially in the House here. Some of them seem to be being elevated by this leadership. That's a real concern to me, because those are folks who I don't think have much interest in finding bipartisan agreement.
Congressman, thank you for the time. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, happy holidays, and thanks so much, Jason.
Let's stay in D.C. for a moment here. A group of Texans testified before Congress the other day. These were the mothers and fathers of school children who were massacred in Uvalde last May. Our next guest is State Senator Roland Gutierrez, a Democrat who represents Uvalde and who also made that trip there with them. Senator Gutierrez, welcome back to the program here. You testified the other day to the U.S. House Committee on the Judiciary about the Uvalde massacre. What was your main message to lawmakers?
Well, Jason, as you know, we've talked about the police response and the failures that happened on that day. And that's important because these events don't happen in a vacuum. You just don't, there is no perfect mass shooting. Here we had law enforcement take 77 minutes to breach the room, and unfortunately more casualties were had because of that failure. And so when you talk about gun safety, we have to take failure, we have to take human error, system failure into consideration. The fact is, had this young man not had these types of mass assault weapons, this would not have happened. And those choices are choices that are made in the Texas legislature, up here in Washington. We have to be having a discussion that's based on everything and all of the facts that are on the ground.
But isn't it a non-starter among Republicans to talk about raising the age to even purchase an assault weapon or even take them away?
Jason, I'm going to keep having this conversation for as long as I'm in public office because unfortunately, as you heard from my testimony, I've seen all of the videos. I've seen children and their bodies mangled. I've seen blood-soaked rooms. I've seen children piled in corners like kindling. And I don't want that to ever happen again in Texas. And so I'm going to keep talking about it, and I'm going to keep asking for change, whether it's an assault weapons ban at the federal level or an age limit in Texas. We have to be having these conversations because no parent should have to go through what these parents have gone through.
Senator, we got another revelation just the other day that Texas law enforcement does not require active shooter training. It's unbelievable to say out loud. Now, school police officers must go through active shooter training. Everyone else, law enforcement wise in the state, are not required to undergo that training. Training is one thing, but actually acting on it is completely something else. This seems like an easy fix that the legislature would consider come January.
I'll be filing a bill here in the next few days, Jason, to require just that every certified officer have active shooter training. The most obvious thing.
Senator Gutierrez, thank you for the time. Safe travels back to Texas.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Coming up next here, an interesting question for the roundtable. Has all of Austin's growth made it more moderate politically? I can't wait to hear this one next on the roundtable. Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ian Mitra is back with us from the Texas Tribune. Bud Kennedy is a columnist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Ian, let's start with you and looking at the Austin mayor's race. We began the program with the mayor-elect there, Kirk Watson, and it's got a lot of people saying, based on the results, that Austin might be getting more moderate.
Wow, it's an interesting question. It's certainly one to raise. I mean, look, this is a runoff election. The turnout is not going to be as large as it would be during the the regular election. We're also talking about a mid-December election. Also, just want to point out too that while Kirk Watson won the race, he lost Travis County, the main county where Austin is, but he votes in suburban Williamson County really helped pull him over the top. So there's definitely an influx, and I think also Kirk Watson has pretty good name recognition, which kind of helped him in the race.
And Bud, that's what people may not realize. The city of Austin City's limits go into Williamson County and down into Hayes County just a tad, and it's the suburbs that really kind of helped him.
Yeah, it's the voters in those other counties that put him over the top. Now, we said this was going to be an election, mostly an older voter turnout, but you have a lot of new people who moved into town. They moved into these outlying subdivisions, and they want police service, and they're moderate or even conservative voters. They came to Texas for jobs and their big house and their real estate and their freedom, and they want to keep it that way. And so they tended to vote more moderate. In Fort Worth, we see there are 2,000 Fort Worth voters who live in Denton County. We see the same effect here. Growth makes the city more moderate.
What do you think about that, Bernadine? Austin has kind of become known as this liberal entity, but does this election change things?
I don't think so. I think that what we have seen, especially since it was so close, that you're looking at voters who just want something done. And the fact that it was close showed that they were split somewhat between who they wanted to get it done, but they chose Watson. And Watson is going to have to address those issues, make Austin more affordable, and do the things that it will take for him to get elected in 2 more years. But I don't think it has a lot to do with whether it's liberal or conservative. It's just that they want to get things done. That's why it's so close.
Let's stay in Austin for a moment, Bud, and Governor Abbott warning charities and other NGOs, non-governmental organizations, not to help border crossers. Why the warning?
Well, everything's changing there, and with what's feared to be an influx across the border. He doesn't want the state effort and the Operation Lone Star to be running into other charities and groups who are trying to help people across, but he's trying to keep them from crossing. But most of all, it's trying to look tough. Governor Abbott is a master at saying and doing things that make the state look tough without encroaching on the actual federal role at the border.
Bernadine?
But you know what? I think Bud is correct that he wants to do something and probably take the focus off Operation Lone Star, but it just looks as if he's being mean. Because, and I'm not saying he is, but to investigate nonprofits, I don't know if that makes you look tougher or just as if the state is mean in dealing with its immigrants. It actually is, it's interesting, but it's just head scratcher.
It is kind of a head scratcher. Ian, what's your take on this?
And then, I mean, also we just want to remember too, like a lot of nonprofits, particularly in the U.S., are really filling in on services that aren't being provided. They're helping with with shelter, food services, and things like that for people coming over. So they're providing vital services and support. So I think that's a key part to remember in all of this as well.
That's a great point as well too. Ian, thanks so much. Bud, Bernadine, we appreciate that as well as always too. Thank you for watching Inside Texas Politics. Hope you have a great set of holidays, and we'll see you back here on January 1st. Take care.